So part A. Part A should have probably been, A and C should probably be the easiest ones on this. A might be easier just because we've done it more often. We are checking, it asks to check to see if the data is what? Linear. So when we are checking to see if it is linear, what is the very first thing we look at? And what do we want to check the scatter plot for? Scatter plot what? It's fairly linear, straight line pattern, something about, hey, we looked at the scatter plot and it looked linear. Then I need to move to talk about the what? And how many things do I need to check from the residuals plot? 3. What's the first one? There's no pattern. What else? I will tell you now, from a grading aspect, that is the one that I count off on tests the most often, especially for missing this portion. So make sure that you're paying attention to the one in front of you. If they didn't write that, write it in your color or whatever. And what else? And our residuals look like they're between a little bit 5 and a little bit more than -5, but our Y values are between like 50 and 120 something, so that seems reasonable. So, is this linear model appropriate for modeling the data? So somewhere you should have, a lot of you just started with yes, and that's fine. But make sure they answered that. B. This one, and I'm pretty sure this actually was an AP exam question. I'm like really almost positive. A lot of people are going to miss this problem because they did not read. And they think, I know what this is talking about, so I'm going to do it. Let's back up and think about the problem in itself. Looking at this, let's talk through the pieces of this. What is, and even if you're writing on theirs, it's not a bad idea to write this for them. This is my what? Y. How do I know that that is the one that's my y-intercept? It's always beside the word constant, and it is a constant. What is this? Slope. What is this always going to be? We've got an S, which we haven't really talked about that much. I don't know if we're talking about it at all. Which of these do we use? So of this whole page for right now, we've got our equation up here. That's our y-intercept, which is shown there. That's our slope, which is shown there. That's our x, which is also shown, and then our r squared. So this first problem starts to look like it is talking about slope, kind of. Or some of you might have thought about it this way, because it says the change in the average this for each additional this. That starts to look like your interpretation of slope. So it says, what is our x in this problem? So with what's above what I have written, this part right here, does that check out for this being slope? Yes, because, well, for each additional x, well, that is my x. What is my y? Is that what this problem is talking about? It looks like that's what's here, but how is this? Oops. How is this different than this? Here it's talking about amount, and here it is talking about cost. So it is not directly asking about that slope relationship. It is instead asking about converting one thing. So our slope is 2.1495. So let's kind of write that. I know the problem doesn't ask you to do this, but 2.1495. And you don't need to write this with me. Tell me what to write here. And it just says units, right? Everybody agree with me with that part? So what this is now saying is it wants us to change this. It wants to change this to be what? I guess I should say here would switch to cost. So if our fuel consumption is going to increase by 2.1459 units, well, how do I know the relationship between fuel consumption and cost? It gives us that. So all I am doing is what? In part B. I am just switching that to now be cost instead of consumption. And what do I get when I do this? Let me have this in front of them or type it. 7 what?
Would we get it wrong if we use the simplified slope from the equation?
Don't ever use the simplified if they also give you the not simplified, or the rounded if they also give you the not rounded. But on the AP exam, I think they'd still give you that one. So this one, the math behind what's going on here and the understanding of what's going on here, I think is very easy, but I would expect a lot of people to miss it because they are just thinking the wrong thing. And like that's kind of designed to be that way. Questions on that one? So part C says interpret the value of R squared. Well, to be honest, you either know this one now or you don't. Our R squared value gives it to us as 96.7. So what? N, which is, when we write this one, we usually just write percent of variation in Y. But why can I not do that for this problem the way it is? We never defined Y. Now, if you defined Y somewhere on the page and then you wrote Y there, that's absolutely fine. But it's 96.7% of the variation in fuel consumption. What? And what did I say is the most important part of that whole sentence? Percent of variation in y. It's definitely that can be explained. Sometimes they'll give you multiple choice that don't give you exactly word for word that written way, but it talks about percent of variation in y that can be explained. So the percent of variation in y is the most important part of that. And then the last part, I would imagine not everyone definitely got this right. Even people who got this right might not have gotten it fully correct. Yes, no. Would it be reasonable to use the fitted regression equation to predict the fuel consumption for a train on this route if the train had 65 rail cars? Just plugged in. Yes, no. Yes, no. No. That is an x variable, right? Well, look back at your graph or your x variables. My x's only go from 20 to 50. So I am now predicting something that is not within those, that's like out here-ish. So your answer should be those are different things. Most of you wrote something along the lines of would have written what would I finish there with what most of you are saying? Just very generic terms. Which just means I'm estimating something from a model that is not using a number out there, which means it might not be the same. Now, a really good answer here would be one word, which somebody said already, which is what? This is extrapolation. And that is exactly what we just said in words. The x values are from about 20 to 50. 60 is outside of those values. Extrapolation. Now, if this were a test that I was giving, I would give some credit if you said yes and justified it well enough to be like, I understand that the x values are from 20 to 50, but 65 isn't really that far away. So like, even if you went with a different answer, if you're justifying your knowledge of what's tested, what it's testing, and that kind of thing, you can still get most of the credit for this type of problem. But extrapolation would definitely be the key word that would make it or break it for you in a good way on AP exam. All right, questions about anything on this problem?